Well, good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. It's early August, which means our gardens and landscapes are at their peak. And it's time once again to check with our experts for timely tips and problems to prevent. Back with us from the University of Vermont are Leonard Perry and Ann Hazelrig. Great to see you both again.
Good to be back.
Now, Leonard, to start with, you've got some flowers.
I have some coneflowers here, Judy, and this is a very popular perennial now. A lot of people have these. There are many varieties out there. I'm trialing these actually for hardiness and performance, but I had a grad student recently who also looked at some of the coneflowers for attractiveness to pollinators. Oh. And what she found was the traditional purple coneflower was the most attractive. This is actually a variation on it called Merlot. It has these very dark purple stems here, which are very nice. But so that would be attractive to pollinators. Next most attractive was this white one. It looks about the same, just a different color. This is White Swan. These varieties done really well in mine over several years. Probably less attractive would be this one. It's one of my favorite though. It's Sombrero Salsa Red. It's a newer one. It's Fire Engine Red. It has white on the back of the petals as they unfurl. So that's just a really attractive one. But the one the pollinators really don't like are these ruffled ones that they have no clue where the flowers are. They look great. So if you're going to have some of these different ones, the bottom line is to get some of the traditional ones like the purple ones for the pollinators so you can have the attractive ones for yourself.
Well, terrific. Now you also have been busy in the herb garden as well.
We have. Basil is one of our favorite herbs at home. We use it for a lot of things, pesto and salads. One of our favorites, a caprese salad, which has slices of tomato, mozzarella, and some of these basil leaves with some drizzle of vinaigrette on it. Just wonderful in the summer. But when you're growing basil, one of the things you want to do is pinch off these flowers. You don't really want it to go to flower. This will help it branch more. And about now, what you can do too is you notice these branches coming out the side here. You can just pinch off above those, and then you can use these leaves. When you're using them, tear them, don't cut them for the best aroma and flavor, but then these side shoots will come out and you'll get a whole nother crop of basil too.
Oh, great. That's good to know. Now, and you're head of the UVM Plant Diagnostic Clinic. What are you seeing this time of year?
Well, lots of different things. Bugs are the first. I brought some pictures of this one interesting insect, and there's no need to control it because it doesn't cause that much damage. But it's called a Rudbeckia. It's a psyllid, and it's only on sunflower, black-eyed Susan, I guess it is. And it causes these raised purple discolorations on the upper side of the leaf. And then if you turn the leaf upside down and look on the underside of the leaf, you'll see this little small insect. We can look at the underside on the next slide. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting looking insect. This is the immature form of the nymph of this psyllid, and it's the feeding damage from this insect is causing those raised purple bumps. And it's just sort of interesting. I mean, you don't need to go out and spray it or anything, but you know, if you see that, that's what's happening with your black-eyed Susans.
Will it kill the plants?
No, it just makes them look a little spotty.
Okay, all right.
The next insect, everybody's got this in their gardens probably right now, and you had mentioned Japanese beetle.
Yes.
That's the copper and green colored insect on the left that causes that lacy damage on a lot of different plants, raspberries, grapes. I've noticed them on my birch right now. They are voracious feeders, and when they feed, I guess the leaves emit a pheromone or a odor that attracts more beetles. Oh, okay. So that's why they seem to congregate. But they do a lot of damage. You can just hand pick, like you said you were doing on your plants. Hand pick. Also shaking the plants, they fall off really readily.
And I know there are various traps and so forth that are on the market. Do those work, or do they just attract them?
Well, they do attract them, and I remember a friend, John Turmel, the state entomologist, always used to say, yeah, buy those for your neighbors for Christmas. So they would attract the beetles away from your house.
Nice.
Yeah, the other insect was right next to that Japanese beetle picture. It's another beetle called the oriental beetle, and it's more mottled than the Japanese beetle, but it has these really neat club-shaped antennae.
Yeah.
And that's how you see that. It's not as voracious of a leaf feeder as Japanese beetle, but it will eat flowers, daisy flowers, I guess is its preference. So.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And so we also like to answer viewer questions. And Leonard, I guess you have one about
we do.
houseplants.
We got a question from Mary Forrest. Thanks for writing, Mary, who wrote, "My Amaryllis only blossoms for the first 2 years, then I only get leaves. Why?" Of course, Amaryllis blooms, usually in the wintertime. It's popular at Christmas and Valentine's Day. You want to keep it watered and fertilized up through about now, the first part of August, middle of August. Start withholding water and let the foliage die back. Then you want to store it cool, 40 to 55 degrees, for about 8 weeks. So it needs that rest period that's cool. And then when you see new growth, or about 6 weeks before you want it to bloom, you pull it out of the cold back to warmth, start watering sparingly until you see more growth, and then about 6 weeks later you should get blooms.
It's my problem to be remembering to do that.
Yeah, you better write it down on the calendar.
We have another quick flower question too about preparing some flowers for field days and fairs.
We do, and actually these were brought in, and I wanted to just talk about these a little bit. When picking flowers for the fair, a couple things is pick them in the morning when they're fresh. Put them right in water. Don't put leaves in the water. That'll spoil the water. And follow the directions. If it says 3 flowers, don't put 5 or 6 just because you've got a lot of great flowers. These Rudbeckia, Black-Eyed Susans here are a great example for several things. One is they're fairly common, so a lot of people would enter these. So as a judge, we'd judge these a little bit more critically than something that was very unusual. Flowers should be uniform, not only in the flower, but among the flowers. So if you had these two, for instance, this has spots on it and this doesn't, they're nice flowers, but they're very different, so that might detract from it. Insect and disease damage. This has some insect chewing on the sides of the petals. That would detract, points off for that, especially if they're insects. They might just be thrown out because they don't want to infect other plants. And so look for uniformity. This little flower petal coming up here, there's nothing to say that, if it is up here and doesn't look good, you could actually just, before you enter it, take it right off. What the judges don't see, they can't judge. So anyway, those are just some tips. If you can use a flower preservative too, that really helps them last longer.
So as a judge, you're really looking for sort of perfectly matched specimens.
Yeah, pretty much matched and uniform and no insect damage. Those are some of the real keys. Fresh looking.
And how about a vase or presentation? Does that matter?
Usually not, because usually the fairs provide those, but definitely keep them in water till you bring them in and put them back in water. And again, if you have some preservative, that really helps keep them through the length of the fair better.
Okay, that's good advice. Thanks a lot. Anne, what else are you seeing in the clinic this time of year?
Well, I had one other insect problem. This was actually in my yard. I can find most of the problems right in my yard, and it's on a serviceberry or a Amelanchier, and it's the picture shows that the leaves look kind of bronzed. Juneberry looks really, there it is, bronzed and sort of stippled on the upper side of the leaf. And if you turn it upside down, you see this really lacy insect. It's really kind of an interesting insect. It has piercing, sucking mouth parts, so it's sucking out chlorophyll and plant juices and causing the damage. And often they leave black fecal spots on the undersides. And I was just reading, these insects are attracted to drought-stressed plants, so that's probably why I'm seeing it on my plants I haven't been watering. That next picture that we were just showing is a really cool disease. Leonard actually brought a sample of it too. It's called hollyhock rust. And hollyhocks are beautiful. This is the leaf Leonard brought in, and you can see these yellow spots on the upper side of the leaf, and then if you turn it upside down, you see these brown rust-colored pustules, and that's the fungus sporulating. And it really disfigures hollyhocks, and really it's been pretty dry throughout the whole season so far, and they've looked really good, but Leonard said all of a sudden it's showing up on his, and that's because we've gotten a little bit more rain recently, and so the disease just takes off.
What should you do?
Well, it's a little bit like, if your plants are covered at this point, it's a little too late to do anything. But really, you should clean up your hollyhocks really well in the fall, because the spores overwinter on that diseased tissue. If you can move them, that's a good thing, but they're perennials, or they self-seed, I guess. But if you wanted to totally prevent it, I think you can look for resistant cultivars or spray fungicides right when they first start coming up, and you have to spray on a weekly basis.
So don't wait till you have them.
Right, exactly, exactly.
I've just been pulling off some of those leaves. That's actually one of the better ones on some of the plants, and you know, they're just going to die back. So we just, once they get pretty infected, we just, and it starts and moves up. So we just pull the lower leaves off. That lets more air in. And again, we just take those leaves and put them somewhere else. You know, compost, not compost them, but put them in the trash. So
throw them away.
You know, get some of that.
And are there resistant cultivars? Do you know?
Well, you know, they're not really. There are a couple species that are supposedly resistant. I'm going to be trying those this next year, but I found just some of the seedlings, some right next to each other. Some will get it more than others. So I know there's some resistance just within those seedlings.
Right.
Interesting. We've been talking about plants, but Leonard, do you have a few other things you want to show people?
Yeah, hummingbirds are popular. A lot of people have the feeders, and we have a couple of these traditional feeders with a little perch form. The problem we've had this year, the woodpeckers are driving us crazy in many ways. But one of the ways is they're becoming obese. They're spending all their day drinking this nice sugar water out of here, and so keeping the hummingbirds away. So I thought I would get something try something different. So I went and got this one. This has a little, this is one that rotates. It hangs like so, and that's where the hummingbird comes. The bird tries to land on it, and it tilts back, and they can't get a perch on it. The problem is the bees can, and the bees are keeping the hummingbirds away now. So that's one of the problems with this one. So I just got this one. So far, the bees haven't tried a beautiful little teardrop shape. Has a couple of feeding ports, and it took the hummingbirds a couple hours to find it and figure it out. And so far, no bees on this one, but you fill it with the hummingbird liquid. So anyway, well, hopefully there'll be some there. So basically I'm trying them all out there. There'll be something for everybody.
More research to follow. You also have some books that you want to recommend?
I do have some books, and I brought 3 books that are appropriate this time of year. This is one of my favorite. There's a lot of wildflowers out. It's Newcomb's Wildflower Guide. That's been out for several decades now, and this is a hardback. You can get a paperback version now, but I've used this ever since college, and it's just, it has a real simple key in there. You figure, at the beginning, you figure out the right at the beginning the flower type and plant habit and plant, leaf type, gives you a number, and then you look up the number and the key, and then further go down, and it says what page to go to, and then it has diagrams. So Newcomb's Wildflower Guide is great. We're talking about problems. This is one that if people have fruit plants, what's wrong with my fruit garden? By a couple of people have written several books of what's wrong with books. But in the beginning, it has the different fruits one by one, just how to culture them. Then it has good pictures on of the different types of pests here, and it has pictures and talks about them, and then goes to the different types of controls you can look up. So just a real nice book on fruit problems, if you have that. And another popular plant at the present are hydrangeas, and this is different from some of the other books. Hydrangeas in the North. This is written by a grower in upstate New York, fairly thin book, but he's basically researched a lot of the newer varieties and how to make those, get them to bloom. That's one of the problems. Some of these, they may live over but not bloom.
Mine blooms, but it blooms in the back of the plant rather than the front.
Well, anyway, Hydrangeas for the North by Basil. It's a good book if you like to grow hydrangeas, and they aren't blooming.
Right. So you have a few more things, Anne, you want to mention? A
couple things. I'm seeing a lot of powdery mildew out there right now because this fungus disease doesn't like a lot of rain the way some of the other fungus diseases prefer, but this one prefers high humidity. Powdery mildew, it looks like white powder is sprinkled over the leaves. It attacks a lot of different plants. That's on lilac, rhododendron. You can try to use hort oils. Anything to open up the plant to more air will decrease that plant disease.
And I know if people have more questions, you have a website, and Leonard's website too, with all kinds of information for folks.
Always contact the Master Gardener website. That's a great one. There's the 1-800 number, and then Leonard's website.
Yeah, and then I've got my website. I've got a whole article on Perry's perennial pages, perrysperennials.info, just on the basil we were talking about, for instance.
Well, you're making me hungry talking about these recipes. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.